Hi and welcome. In this video I'm going to show you how to deploy a full-stack web application online for free. And we are going to deploy a React frontend, a Node.js backend and a MySQL database. But this is not a coding tutorial. I'm assuming that you are already familiar with React, Node.js and MySQL, and that you also know how to work with Git and already created a GitHub account. This video is for you if you are at a stage where you just successfully coded your first full-stack application and it's running just fine on your local machine. You also pushed the code to GitHub already, and now you are wondering how to migrate your amazing project from your local machine to the internet. If that sounds like you, then we are good to go. Alright, let's get started. So this is my little app, super simple, just for demonstration purposes, and as you can see it's currently running on my local host right now. If I want to get it online, I have several options. There are many services out there which allow you to deploy your projects, but for the purposes of this video we are going to go with Netlify for the front end and Railway for both the backend and the database as well. I chose these services because both of them are free and both of them are very simple and straightforward to use, and I feel like this is exactly what we want for our first time deploying. First we are going to deploy our database, then we are going to work with the backend, and in the final step we are going to take care of the front end. But of course, if maybe you are only interested in deploying the backend and don't care about the database and the front end, definitely feel free to make use of the timestamps that I created and skip around in the video to get the information that you specifically need. With that said, now let's go to railway.app, and Railway offers several plans for us. Now we are going to go with the free starter or trial plan, and of course it has some kind of restrictions. You can see here it offers $5 or 500 hours of usage each month. So these 500 hours are about 20 days, and that means after 20 days unfortunately your deployed services will shut off. They will go into a sleep mode and will not be available for the rest of the month. Of course, that would be a huge deal breaker if we needed our application to be available at all times and if we used it professionally to make money, but I feel in that case you would go with a paid service anyway and not rely on the free starter trial. For our purposes, if this is a hobby project or maybe you want to get it online to show to a potential employer, or you have a presentation, or I don't know, maybe you just want to show it to your family and friends, this is really more than enough and we are good to go. You just have to be aware of this limitation and realize that you only have 20 days of the month, and after that your service won't be accessible anymore. But at the start of the next month it resets again and you can restart all of your services to run for the next 20 days. Okay, so now let's get started. And first of all, of course, you have to sign up for a free account. I already did that. And I recommend that you connect with your GitHub account so it's even easier to deploy. Alright, here we are, and you can see I already have another project here, and you can also see this limitation up here. But now what we want to do is to create a new project. And here we can choose from several different templates. We can also deploy directly from a GitHub repository, which is what we are going to do with the backend. But for now we want to choose a MySQL template and let Railway create a database for us. Alright, our database is created. That took a few seconds, but now it's here, and of course it is still empty, it has no data in it, and for that you would have to go here and create your tables. So you can do it like this and choose from these predefined options. Personally I think that's a bit restrictive and I prefer to go here to query. And here you can pass in your MySQL table creation statements and other MySQL queries. And now the easiest way to do this without having to look up all the table creation statements again and typing all of that and making mistakes, the easiest way to get all of that is to create a so-called SQL dump. That is basically a way to export our local database data into a file, and then we can use that file to import our database on another machine or send to somebody else, and it's a really useful and great thing. So in order to create a SQL dump, you have to use this here. You have to be outside of your database, so don't log in. And outside you are going to type MySQL dump -u, then your username, -p, then the name of the database you want to export, and you output that into a new file that has to end in a .sql extension. and you can name it whatever you want. I called mine deploy database, and I already ran that command. So here is my SQL dump. And as you can see here, I have all the data that I have in my local database. So let's look for the table creation statements. Here is my users table. This is the first one I want to create. That stuff here, engine, you can ignore all of that. We want to copy this. Then we can paste it here, semicolon, and we run the query. Alright, that's it. Query ran successfully. So now let me quickly create my second table. Where is it? Here. And this query ran successfully too. So now we should have both of our tables here in our online database. Now, of course, they are also empty. You could actually import your data with this SQL dump right here. You see, I could import my local data here for testing purposes or whatever, but I'm not going to bother. I don't need that data. What I need, however, are these variables here. You can see that here we have variables for the database name, the host name, the password, the port, and the username, as well as a connection URL. This is going to become really important in a second, but for now we want to work with the first ones of these here, and we are going to need that to connect to this database. Now in your code, I'm sure there's something like this here, right? Maybe you have it in another file, maybe you are not using these environment variables, but I'm sure you have some way to connect to your database. And for deploying online, we are definitely going to use environment variables. So if you don't know what environment variables are, they are a great way to store away and hide sensitive data. For example, passwords or API keys, basically anything that you don't want to go on GitHub. Because if I would post the password for the railway database right here and then push it to GitHub, well, you can imagine that's maybe not the greatest idea. So we need some way to hide it from the public eye, so to say. And for that we are going to use these environment variables. I will give you a really quick introduction in case you don't know them. So first things first, in order to use them, you would have to go to your backend folder right here. Let me just clear that. And now you would have to install an npm package called .env. It's just npm i.env, like this. I already installed this package, and once you did, it should show up in your dependencies right here. And then, in order to use these environment variables, you have to import them just like this. Require.env config parentheses and a semicolon. Then you are good to use them in your files, but if you are using them locally, you have to configure them first in a local file too, and for that you will create a file like this called .env. In that file, you can set up your variables like this. They have to be in capital letters, equals, and then the value, just like this. No spaces, no quotation marks, you write it like this. And then if you have the .env npm package installed, and if you are importing it, you can access these variables, and I did this to push my code to GitHub already, so that my password for my local MySQL database is not online on GitHub for everyone to see. Now, in your case, you don't actually need this local .env file, but what you are going to need is these variables from Railway, and we have to replace them here to get the proper connection. This object here for connecting won't work anymore, unfortunately. I'm going to get rid of it so we don't get confused. And the new way to connect will be that MySQL URL string that we saw already. This one right here, I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to paste it into a new variable. Obviously you can also paste it right in here, but I'm going to create a new variable outside. I'm going to call it URL database. And I'm posting the string right here. Obviously it won't work because it's not formatted as a string. And to do that, we are going to use template literals and string interpolation, so with the backticks. And now what we have to do is to get rid of these double curly brackets. We don't need them. One pair of curly brackets is enough. And in order to use the environment variables, you will have to prefix them with process.env. Just like this. Okay, so now I'm going to do that for all of these, and I'll see you in a second. Alright, and this is what it will look like in the end. As I said, you have a single pair of curly brackets, and all of these variables are prefixed with process.env. Now we are good to use it, and we can pass this connection string or the variable storing it into this create connection function, just like this. Okay, and we are done connecting to the database. Now, if you would want to use it locally, you would also have to go to this .env file and obviously replace the variables and give them the correct name and replace the values right here. But unfortunately, we cannot even use that locally. If you would like to now maybe fire up your local frontend and backend and try to send data to that database right now, it wouldn't work because online services don't like it if you try to send data from your local host. I'm very certain that you will get an error message in that case. So unfortunately, you just have to take my word that what we did is correct and it's going to work in the end. Just trust me. Okay, but what you will have to do is first of all save this file, of course. And then it's also very important if you created a .env file like this that you add it to your git ignore, okay? Otherwise, all we did was useless and you would just push your env file to GitHub and everybody could see your password and everything. So if you have that local .env file, add it to your git ignore. If you didn't create that file and just did what I showed you like this, then you can forget about it and we are good to go. So now what we have to do is, of course, update our GitHub repository so that GitHub and later Railway has access to this connection string right here. So I'm going to do that really quickly. And now that GitHub is up to date and we configured our connection, we are actually already done with the database and we can start working on the backend. And for deploying the backend now, we already did the work we needed to do in the code. We just go back to Railway and now you are going to close that. And you are going to add a new project here. Now this time we are going to deploy from a GitHub repository, and what I am going to show you now is how I deploy my mono repository here. That means that I structured my code so that I have a directory for my front-end code and for my back-end code in the same repository. That is just my personal preference. You can do it however you like. You can also easily have a separate repository just for your back-end code and a repository just for your front-end code. That would actually be even easier to deploy, but I'm going to show you how to deploy from this mono repository, and I will also mention how to deploy from a regular single repository. Okay, so we go back to Railway and we choose our repository. We have to configure it. I guess the first time you use it, you have to connect to GitHub and enter your password and everything. I'm going to choose this and set up my app. And now here we are, and you can configure Railway in a way that it has access to all of your repositories automatically, or you can select one repository at a time, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to select my to-do deploy. Here it is. And then I'm going to save. Alright, now that Railway is configured and has access to the correct repository, I'm going to go to New once again, select the GitHub repository again, and here it is. Now I'm going to choose the to-do deploy repository, and Railway will start automatically deploying. Okay, Railway is done deploying, and you can see it failed here, which is no surprise. This is because of my mono repository, because like you saw, I have two directories in here. Railway doesn't know what to do and which one to target, but luckily we know what to do. So we go here and we go to settings. Now, if you deploy from a single repository, if you just connected a backend repository separately, then probably you don't have to do any of this and this should work right away and the deploy was successful for you. But in my case, I will have to configure now which directory to target. And so here the branch is main, that is correct. Down here, this is the name of the service. We can just call it backend just to be really specific. Okay. And this is my repository, which is correct. And now here, the root directory, it's just targeting the base directory. In my case, this is not working because I have two. So I will have to say, please target the backend directory. Like this. And then, very important, don't forget to save here. Okay. Now Railway knows what to do and will automatically start to redeploy. The other options here are fine. You don't have to bother with that. So now we can go here again and watch our deployment. Okay, Railway is just done building. That was about 20 seconds, I think. So now this time the build was successful and our backend is actually online now too. But of course now our backend needs a way to connect to our database, and for that we are using our variables once again. So because we have our database here, we can see all of our variables, which makes copy and pasting a little less annoying than it is. And now here, our backend database has no variables at all. So now it's just a lot of copy and pasting. We are going to copy the variable name and add it as a new variable. And then we are going to add the value as well and add that. Okay, now Railway is going to redeploy. That's a lot of deploying, but that's not our problem. And I'm going to do this for all of these variables except the URL. We don't need that. And I'll see you in a second. Alright, I'm done copy and pasting, and Railway is done redeploying, and now I have all of my variables stored here once again. We have them duplicate now here in the database and here for the backend. And in my case, I can show you the password. I'm going to delete this project afterwards anyway, but I hope you can see why we need to do it in this way and keep our password and other data like that away from GitHub and not have that open for everyone to view. And that also means for other important data, like in my case, I have this right here for my JSON Web Token to create the hash. This also shouldn't be on GitHub, so I'm going to copy that value and that variable name too and add it to my variables. But of course, if you don't have it, you don't have to follow this step, because this is just so that my specific app will work. So I need this, and that was super secret. And now we're good to go. Railway has access to all of the variables that are needed for my code, and that means that we are actually already done deploying the database and the backend too. So 2/3 are already done. And now, as a last note on Railway, at the start of the next month, if you used up your 500 hours and want to redeploy your project again, all you have to do is to come here again. The database will redeploy automatically. It will just become active without you having to do anything. But for the backend, you will see here this will be red and say something like removed, you exceeded your monthly limit or something like that. And all you have to do to start it again is to go here and select rollback. Okay, that's all you have to do, then it will start to redeploy for the next month and you are good for another 20 days. To be super safe, you can also check the variables in the next month again and make sure that your database still has the same password. That actually changed once for me, so the database had a new password in the new month, so I had to go up here again to the backend variables and then change the password there as well. Just make sure you keep an eye on these things, but other than that, we are now done with Railway. Okay, so now time for the last step, and we are going to netlify.com, which is where we are going to deploy our front end. Now, Netlify also offers a free plan for us, and this is a very generous plan. To be honest, you pretty much won't need anything else. These paid plans here are just if you are using your application professionally, if you need a lot of bandwidth and some extra services. But for our purposes, this free starter plan here is very generous, and you have none of these restrictions like on Railway. You can use the service the whole month, no 20-day limit. It's absolutely awesome, so if you just want to deploy a front-end application, then Netlify really is the way to go in my opinion. Okay, now you have to sign up for a free account, and once again I recommend that you connect to your GitHub account. And here we are. You can see that I already have several sites deployed here, and what we want to do now is to add a new site, and once again we are going to import an existing project, and that is our GitHub repository. But now before we connect, we need to update our code a little bit, because once again here in the front end we are actually going to use environment variables too. But no worries, this time it's going to go super fast. You just have to come to your code and you have to find all the places where you connect to your backend. So whenever you receive data from your backend or send data to the backend, this is the part of the code that we need right now. This can be in some use effect or in some other place. I obviously don't know how you structured your code, but in my case I have a separate functions directory where I connect to the backend, and this is what we want. It doesn't matter if you use Axios or Fetch. What you want is this connection URL right here. And this will be where we connect now to the Railway backend. Localhost won't do anymore. In order to do that, you could also paste it directly in here, but I think it's preferable to use an environment variable for that as well, because if one day maybe we decide to use another service, then we don't have to come to the code again and delete all of these Railway URLs and post our new URL and push to GitHub again. All we have to do is to change one environment variable on Netlify, and that's way easier if you ask me. So now for the front end, all you have to do is to create another of these .env files, and once again, if you have a local file like that, remember to put it in your gitignore, that's very important, otherwise everything is useless, and like I said, we are going to push our secrets to GitHub anyway, so I have mine right here. And now for the front end, what is very important is this part here. In the backend, I told you you can name your environment variables whatever you like. For the front end, you have to prefix them with React_app_. Okay, you have to do it like this, otherwise it won't work and React won't recognize the environment variable. So this right here is mandatory. Afterward, you can name it once again whatever you like. And this is where we are going to paste our Railway URL. So now to get that URL, we go back to Railway and to our backend project. And now here in the settings, we will have to find the domain name, or rather we have to generate a new domain name for the first time. Like this, and this is now the URL to connect with our Railway backend. So let's copy that. And I'm going to go in here, delete that and post it in here. You don't have to do this. Like I said, if you try to access this now from your local host, you will get an error anyway. I'm just posting it here so that I have it. And now what we have to do is to use that environment variable name. I'm going to copy it and replace it here instead of our local host. And once again, like in the backend, we will have to start with process.env and then paste our environment variable name right here. So this is the same as in the backend, process.env. And now here, like I said, that React_app_ prefix and then your environment variable name. But that's actually it for the front end. Like I said, you don't have to import or require anything. You don't have to install the npm package. Now all you have to do is to find every instance where you connect to your backend and replace the URL like this. So I'm going to copy that and replace that in my other files, and I'll see you once this is done. Alright, now I replaced my localhost connection with the Railway URL in every instance where I use it. So now it's time to update my GitHub repository once again. So now we are good to go back to Netlify and actually connect to our repository. And once again we have to configure our repository, and for that you go down here and configure the Netlify app on GitHub. Here it's the same as on Railway. You can configure it in a way so Netlify has access to all of your repositories automatically, or select only one repository, which is once again which I'm going to do. This here, I'm going to add it to the list and save. And now it appears here and I'm going to select it. And now here I can configure the deploy settings. So this is all correct. It's the main branch. I only have that one branch. But this is the important part. So here the base directory is the directory which Netlify targets for deploying the code. And this is once again for my mono repository with both the front-end code and the back-end code. I think they even say it here. Yeah, exactly, only for mono repos. If you have a single repository, if you just want to deploy your front-end code, and your repository has the React source and public folder, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to do anything here. This will just choose your base directory like this, and this is perfect. You're done. But in my case, with the mono repository, I have to tell Netlify to target the front-end directory. And then as a build command, we want to run npm run build, which will create an optimized version of our code for running it online. And the publish directory is where this optimized version will go. So I want to go it into a new directory just called build. So again, to clarify, this is the directory that Netlify looks for our project code. This is the build command that creates an optimized version of our code. And this is where that optimized code version will be stored on Netlify. So now we're pretty much good to go. But one thing, I'm pretty sure I will get an ESLint warning for my code. ESLint is not happy how I use the useEffect hook. It wants me to include some dependencies, but in this case I know what I'm doing, I'm fine. This is not a bug, nothing is breaking, everything is working, so I want to ignore that warning. The problem is, if you have any kind of warning, then Netlify will not deploy your project. It will throw an error and not allow you to deploy your project. And so in this case, if I want to ignore that one harmless ESLint warning, so what I'm going to do to ignore that ESLint warning is to set CI to false, like this. That stands for continuous integration. We don't have to bother with that. But if you include that one line in front of your build command, then Netlify will ignore all warnings and just go on with the deploy, which is what we want. So, okay, now we are good to deploy. And Netlify is doing its magic. Here you can watch the deploy if you want, like this, and can see what's going on. Alright, and Netlify is done, the site is live, everything worked as you can see, and right up here is what I told you about, that one ESLint warning here with useEffect, it's not happy, it throws this one single warning, and that would be the reason for Netlify to stop the whole deployment, and this is why we need that CI false here. Now, obviously, you shouldn't use that in cases where you have serious error messages. Okay, so don't just ignore your bugs and problems and go use this to just deploy anyway. This is not the way to do it. But in this case here, a linting warning, not even an error message, then okay, let's just ignore that. As I said, I know what's going on here and I know that this is perfectly fine. So now that the site is deployed, we can go back to the main page. And here we have it already with a nice overview. And now Netlify creates these weird site names for us. I would strongly advise you to go to site settings and change the name of the site and to something that you would like to see. And we are almost done, but there's one thing left. And maybe you're asking yourself, so wait a second, how does Netlify know how to connect to Railway right now? And yeah, exactly, you're right. And maybe you also already guessed the solution, and that's right, environment variables once again. So we go here. And this is where we can set our variables, just like this. And now all we have to do is to set that one connection URL that we were using. I have that in my env file. Once again, with the important react_app_ prefix, you also have to do it like this on Netlify. And then we just paste the value as well, which is our connection URL, like this. And we create the variable. And now we have it here on Netlify, and Netlify has access to the Railway URL as well. But in order for it to work, we have to redeploy actually. Railway doesn't automatically redeploy like Railway did if we add a new variable. Right now it has no idea what we are talking about if we are using that environment variable in our code. So we have to trigger another deploy so that it has access to this variable. And for that we are going back to our main page, and here you can see all of your builds. We are going to click the latest one, which is the one we just did. And here in the option settings, you can retry with the latest branch commit. This is if you changed something in your GitHub repository, but in our case we didn't. But we are going to select this option anyway to trigger redeploy to get access to this new environment variable. Okay, Netlify is building once again. Here we can again see how it's doing, and I'll see you once it's done. Alright, the site is live once again, the build was successful, and this means now is the moment of truth. Now we can test if we did everything correctly or if we made some mistake, and let's see if everything works as it should. So we go back to the main page, and we go to our deployed page. And now here, this is the link where we can access it online, so let's check it. And yes, you can see now this is fully online. The one that I was using on my local host is not even running right now. So you see it's no instance online here. So now we are already dealing with our deployed online app. And in order to see if it works, I will register a new user, then log him in, and then add some data to his account so we see if our connection to the backend and to the database is working. So a new user called Bob wants to register. Let's give him a go. And it worked, no error message, so let's log him in. He's bob@gmail.com. And let's log in. And here we are, it already worked. But to be really sure, let's add a to-do to Bob's account. So let's say Bob wants to take a walk. And today. And yeah, this is just a test. Let's submit that. Alright, here it is, and now we can go back to Railway and go to our database and see if our data registered. So yeah, here's Bob with his email account and his hashed password, and in the to-do list we have take a walk today, this is just a test, with the user ID corresponding to Bob. So that means we are done, and if you followed along, that also means that you just successfully deployed your first full-stack application online. Congratulations! I hope that this video was useful for you and that you found the information that you were looking for. So now you're good to go, and you can maybe deploy a few more projects if you have them and if you like. Good luck, and once again, congratulations. Bye!